Hello ladies and gents. In this video we will take a look at the lifecycle methods of a UI5 controller. There are 4 lifecycle methods for controllers, and we will use the source code from the lazy loading video to take a look at how they behave. Let's start with the first one called onInit. Let's go to our object controller. And we have already implemented this one named onInit, which is called once per view when the view is instantiated and before it is rendered. And the most common cases for this method are initializations such as local JSON models, as we did here to set our view model, binding data to the view, which we also did in a previous video using binding templates, or subscribing to router events, which we have also done right here. Now let me just add a console.log here to keep track and say onInit is invoked. And if we go back to our app and navigate to one of our products, we shall see our log here. Now let's go back and take a look at the second one, which is named onBeforeRendering, and let's add it after onInit. And here again I will simply add a console.log and say onBeforeRendering is invoked. And similar to onInit, this method is also called before a view is rendered, but unlike onInit, which is called only once, this one is called before every render. And now if we go back to our app, we can see that onInit is invoked, and after that onBeforeRendering is invoked. Let's go back to the home page and navigate again to a different product, and now we don't see either because this view has already been initialized and it has already been rendered. But one thing you may notice is for some applications, onBeforeRendering might be invoked more than once. That's because multiple controls can trigger this method, and also the next one onAfterRendering. That's why when we want to run a piece of code when we navigate to a view, it's always better to use pattern matched event of that route, as we did here. Now let's move on to onAfterRendering. And this one is very similar to onBeforeRendering, but it is called once the view is rendered on the browser. And that means we have access to the DOM elements and we can manipulate them. First, let's add a console.log. onAfterRendering is invoked, and check our console. And as we see, it is called after onBeforeRendering. And now let's try to access the message strip control in our view in both onBeforeRendering and onAfterRendering. It is this control right here. Let's take a look. And we can see it has this class. So let me copy this and let's try to select it with this class name. First in onBeforeRendering, console.log, and using the jQuery selector, we pass in the class and .length plus, here we can say message strips found in the DOM, and let's copy the same to onAfterRendering. Let's save, and now let's check our console. Now here in onBeforeRendering, we cannot find anything on the DOM because the view has not been rendered yet. But onAfterRendering, we can have access to our message strip, which means we can also manipulate that. So let's do that. Let's copy our selector here and change a CSS attribute, for example, to set the background color to something different, aqua for example. Now if we save, we can see that the color is different. The last lifecycle method is named onExit. Let's add it here. And this one is called once the view is destroyed. This can be done programmatically by calling the destroy method of a view, or when we navigate out of an application, which is the most common case. Let's add our console.log first. onExit is invoked. Now save, go back to our app, and let's navigate to the launchpad here out of our application. And now we can see onExit is invoked. And we can use this method to do some cleanup work. Let's go back to our app and to our code. And let's say we attach the mouse click event in our view in our onInit function. Here let's say window.add event listener. We will listen for the click event, and our listener function will simply count with console.count, and here we'll say clicked. Now let's save, go back to our app and to our object view, of course. We have our messages, and whenever we click somewhere on the screen, it is logged into the console. But now let's go back to the home page out of our application, and let's go back in and again to our object view. And now when we click, we see that it's increased by 2. So the event listener is called twice. That's because we have added an event listener on our window object and didn't remove it when we navigated out of our application. Now first let's create the event handler function separately and name it this._oClickHandler equals, which will be this function right here. And then we set it here. And now when we navigate out of our application here inside onExit, we can say window.remove event listener for the click event, and the listener we would like to remove is onClickHandler here. So we pass in this reference here. And now if we try the same thing again, let's clear everything. Click handler is working fine. We move out of the app, go back in and navigate. And now when we click, our handler is fixed. This is also very useful when you use event bus in your application. And when you subscribe to an event from your controller, you need to unsubscribe when you exit from your application. That would be all for this application. Thank you all for watching, and see you in the next one.